Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don. I'm a consultant in life sciences. I help companies manage complexity and increase performance. Before we hop into today's video, I just wanted to mention just really quickly the organizational maturity assessment that is on my website. This has been moved actually. So where it's demonstrated here in the video actually now has been moved over to the courses section, but still is the same overall organizational maturity assessment for organizations who want to better understand how to scale their organization and some of the complexities that you might run into. And so just a great tool for people to leverage some of the experience overall that I've had in the many decades that I've worked with organizations. And so with that, I wanted to welcome our guest. So Gino Martini is the CEO of Precision Health Technologies Accelerator. Previously, he was the chief scientist of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society. So with that, welcome, Gino.
And good morning. And first of all, can I apologize to listeners who are expecting an Italian accent? I'm an Englishman. So I often have to start my presentations by saying, I'm sorry, but expecting sophisticated Italian. I'm from Liverpool originally, so I'm an Englishman, but with Italian ancestry. So real pleasure and honor to be here today. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it's funny because I mean, oftentimes I run into people who are Italian in the United States, and you would never think that, with an American, I guess you would just never think that. And then all of a sudden your accent, being British is something that just makes you think for a minute. Okay, so Italian last name, but British accent.
Yeah, I mean, I used to travel a lot to America on business, and the customs guy go, but you're English, it's on my passport. I am English.
Very good.
Like I said, it's great to be here.
Thank you. Could you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm English. I'm the product of an Italian economic migrant and an Egyptian mother, believe it or not. And I was raised in Liverpool. I trained as a pharmacist originally, and then I embarked on a PhD in drug delivery at the University of Manchester, and then I entered the industry, pharmaceutical industry, once my PhD was complete. So I had about 20-year experience working in a number of companies like GlaxoSmithKline. Worked a lot in America, did a lot of work in emerging markets, and then I did a brief foray in academia. I was professor at King's College for a couple of years. And then I was then the chief scientist for the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, which is really interesting because that coincided with the pandemic. And then I was approached to run the Precision Health Technology Accelerator in Birmingham, which is a fantastic opportunity, which I'm more than happy to talk about and infuse with your listeners.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's great. And so can you tell us just a little bit more about the Precision Health Technologies Accelerator?
Yeah, I can. Well, first of all, it's located in Birmingham. And for people listening in, Birmingham is the second largest city in the United Kingdom. So it's second after London. And they realised, and it's actually home to some of the biggest hospitals as well. So the Queen Elizabeth Birmingham looks after 1 million people, and the population of Birmingham is 6 million people. So it's been a great research university for many years and a great clinical centre of excellence. And what it needed was a large life sciences campus, and it's decided to do that. It's over 10 acres, and it's called the Birmingham Health Innovation Campus. And the PHTA is located in the first building that's being built as we speak. It's a bit of a shame because the whole plan for this was developed 2 to 3 years ago, and of course it got signed off, and of course the pandemic came along. Okay,
right.
So the pandemic, that well-known spanner in the works, put everything on hold. And I was appointed in October 21 as the chief exec. The idea is we're co-locating, clustering centers of excellence around this life sciences park. So it's basically a 5-minute walk from, like I said, the largest hospital in the United Kingdom, or one of, the Queen Elizabeth Birmingham, a private hospital called the Harbour, which is just being built as we speak, which is actually Healthcare America, so it's a private hospital. The Women's Hospital, again a 5-minute walk. One of the largest medical schools in the United Kingdom, again, 5-minute walk. In fact, the two largest medical schools are actually located outside of London. One's in Manchester, one's in Birmingham. And of course, University of Birmingham is there as well. So, like I said, we're co-locating, all that expertise literally around this life sciences park. Like I said, it's 10 acres. The first building is what we call BHIC 1, Birmingham Health Innovation Campus 1. And in that, the PHTA will be located. We'll be occupying 3 floors 3, 4, and 5. I'm not a landlord. My job is to create an ecosystem. My job is to use this building to connect entrepreneurs, clinicians, people working in the industry together. And it's not just a regional play, i.e., just about Birmingham. It's a national play, international play. Anybody can access this ecosystem. Right now, in the UK, we have a shortage of laboratory space, for example. And by the end of the year, we'll be open and we'll have over 70,000 square feet of top of the range laboratory space and collaboration space that will allow entrepreneurs to talk to each other and work with each other, small companies to actually come in. I use the word small, but not really that small. We'll talk about companies that can hold about 30 odd people because our labs are very, very big. It's the next stage up from being a startup. So that's what we're creating. And like I said, I'm very keen to say I'm not a landlord because my job is to create an ecosystem. Yeah. And for people to access this capability, almost like concierge service. I want to make sure if I can't give you what you need straight away, let me see if I can find somebody else. And we are getting a lot of interest actually from outside of Birmingham, which is really good. And what I want to do today is just talk to people internationally to say, actually, there's more to it than just outside Oxford and Cambridge. We are actually in the middle of the country. We've got fantastic infrastructure, great train service, access by motorway, you name it, it's all there. And so, that's why I'm here today, really.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because I've talked to a few organizations that are similar to what you're developing there in the United States. And, the one question I have in terms of being an accelerator is in the United States, oftentimes the universities create a lot of these, early innovations and then they license them out. Is it the same exact way where you are? Are you going to be bringing a lot of stuff, from the local university into the accelerator?
We will. I mean, but I'm very keen to make it a very much of a hybrid environment,
Mm-hmm.
very diverse. It's a true multidisciplinary. So what can happen is, so on the third floor, for example, our immunology experts from university are going to be housed on the third floor. So these are the guys who developed the new diagnostics, the new biomarkers, the new predictive tests for cancer. The team that actually played an active role in helping the vaccine development in the United Kingdom. They'll be on the third floor. The fourth floor and fifth floor will be mixtures. There could be external companies coming in. There could be clinicians from different universities coming in. It'll be or a pharma company who wants to move in. The idea is to make it a melting pot, to make it a complete diverse mixture. And so that's to me that's the only way you get true collaboration and true diversity of thinking.
Mm.
And so that's what we're trying to do. So we don't want it to be a totally university play. We want it to be very much a mixture of different expertise, different companies, different spin outs. And that's the plan. So there will be an element from the University of Birmingham, obviously, but not exclusively. And, so for example, we have somebody who's developing a new treatment for brain cancer, for example, then it actually be quite a good idea to put a company or an organization that's developing a new treatment for brain cancer alongside them because they can spark ideas off each other. That's the plan. It's to make it a true innovative, collaborative venture in space.
So I'm going to take you back just to your previous role for a second, just to talk about that for a second. Because I mean, to me, again, a lot of these things are just different being an American. So just trying to understand a little bit better. As the chief scientist at the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, what was your main focus there versus what you're doing now? I mean, it sounds to me just almost like night and day. I mean, it just so drastically different.
Well, I mean, it is different. I mean, I'm a pharmacist by training. I did training in community, which I think if I translate that in American, I used to work in your equivalent of Walmart or Walgreens, whoever it was, Walgreens actually. In fact, it was Walgreens because Boots, which is the UK version, has merged into Walgreens now I think about it. But it's just a qualification. What pharmacy taught me was understanding science and biology
Mm.
and chemistry, and I've been able to use those skills in other sectors. So I'm quite unique. I've worked in retail, I've worked in industry, I've worked in academia, and now I'm doing life sciences capability. My role, you say, is night to day. Actually, there's a bit of convergence there because what I was trying to do at the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, so I represented, I don't know, 30, 40,000 pharmacists up and down the United Kingdom, was I was an ambassador for life sciences, understanding that actually pharmacists need to understand the latest advances in science and certainly the latest advances in medicines. Because now, I mean, now we're talking about immunotherapy, now we're talking about CAR T therapies, cell therapies. It's no longer that easy just to give a white tablet to somebody and say, there's your treatment. It's a bit more complex and sophisticated than that. And actually, the role of pharmacists is really important. And so, one of my jobs is to actually raise the awareness of latest medicines, latest innovations, latest diagnostics to the pharmacists at play. And that was really important. And also to make sure that any education, skills and training was being catered for, if that makes sense. So I would also, use my experience to inform the very universities that were actually teaching these latest developments. So there was some convergence, and also I talked to government a lot about making sure that pharmacists were always part of the conversation, so to speak.
Sure.
And because during the pandemic, the pharmacies remained open. They were open. They were the first port of call. And I was very proud and very humbled to be appointed the chief scientist. It really was because it's a pinnacle of my career to do that. I go back to, you go back to the Black Death, the plague in the 1600s. Pharmacies were open then as well. Would you believe they were there? But I actually went back into practice to help out because my local pharmacist literally was on his knees and he really was struggling. So I helped him. But I had this very interesting relationship during the pandemic where during the daytime I was also defending the use of vaccines against anti-vaxxers. But in the evenings, I was volunteering and actually vaccinating people.
Mm.
I did that a lot. I had several thousand people. I think I lost count after the first couple of thousand. But what struck me during that time was the science involved. So, for example, cold chain supply.
Yeah.
Wow, that became a word around the table. What that meant was the Pfizer vaccine was unstable. You needed to put it in the fridge, and now everybody knew about cold chain. But that's science, yeah.
Right. Right.
And when a customer comes into me, or a client comes into me, or a patient comes into me, and goes, "How do you take this medicine? Why do you store it in the fridge?" That's science. You've got to be able to communicate that to individuals. So there was an awful lot of science involved in everyday language. So it was a fantastic role, but it also helped me understand that actually we need to make sure we have an environment that encourages scientists of the future and places where people can actually practice science and actually develop new ideas. And that's why I did what I did. When Birmingham approached me to look at this role, they said, "Look, what we need is somebody who's worked in academia, worked in industry, okay, and actually understands how to communicate science to people because that's what we need." And that's the reason why I took the role on. And I really was very impressed at what they're trying to do. The ambition here is huge. 10 acres, develop the whole site and actually get people talking to each other. And that's what I feel I was good at. And that's one of the reasons why I took on the role. So actually the chief scientist role really was a way of me moving into this new role because what they wanted was a communicator to talk about science. And that was really, really important.
Yeah, it's one of those things that is so important in terms of being able to communicate, exactly what's happening in the sciences out to a broader audience as well, because so many times people get so ingrained in the science, they can only communicate at one level. And unfortunately, you just lose so many of the individuals along the way. I've seen it in terms of, attracting investors, as well as, just getting people to understand, just the basics of the vaccine, was something that, many people, struggled with. Even for anti-vaxxers, they definitely were getting a lot of miscommunication about exactly what the COVID vaccine was and what it could and couldn't do, as well.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously we talk about it. Because we'll be developing vaccines in the PHTA, or certainly some of the teams will be. We forget that vaccines came date back to the 1700s. When Jenner observed that the maids that milked the cows were getting cowpox and actually being resistant to getting smallpox. Okay, and what he did was he actually took the ooze from an open wound of cowpox and was inoculating that into people's systems, and that's what's created the antibodies. So it's really interesting. But that's it's all about communication. And what I found really interesting is that people got really scared of the vaccine. When you say to them, well, actually, this stuff is not new; it's years old.
Right.
Vaccines themselves have saved so many lives since it was rolled out, whether it was through the Merck heritage, Glaxo heritage, all the great, the Sanofi heritage. At the end of the day, they've had this massive contribution to world health, and we mustn't underestimate that. But I also was quite interesting because a lot of people, particularly people in the fitness industry, were quite, oh, I can't put that stuff into my body, and yet they're quite happy to put steroids into the body. I'm just saying, not judging.
Right.
This is proof, right?
Right.
This is what was happening, and I'd say, well, do you understand what you're doing here? But hey ho, we are where we are. And then people are scared of needles as well. I'd have heavily tattooed, people walking into the vaccination centre just faint at the sight of the needle.
Mm.
So it was a good learning curve, and I actually do encourage people, if to go back into practice occasionally, because it makes it real. You see it again. It helps you kind of frame your knowledge and give you a bit more reinforcement as to actually it's good to understand how things happen in clinical practice. So for me, it was a great opportunity for me, and the lessons I've learned during my time as chief scientist during the pandemic, I've been able to hopefully translate in this new role. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to infuse science. I actually want young entrepreneurs and old entrepreneurs, to be fair, to work together in a way that produces latest innovations and latest breakthroughs in medicines.
Now, is there a period of time when people would come to the accelerator and then have to also move on? In the United States, whenever you're in an accelerator, it's normally a brief period of time, and then you need to move your organization forward, and it needs to grow to a certain point by a certain time period.
Yeah, it would have been more of a sustained accelerator. So we're not here. I know in the United States, accelerators like usually 3 to 6 months. That's not what we're about. Our word of acceleration is more accelerating your collaborations to make sure you get the environment around you to help you. But we're looking at a 2 to 3 year period where a company will come in and we will help them embed in our ecosystem, get the resources that they need. Then after 3 years, we'll have that conversation as to, well, are you getting what you need? Are you still growing? Do you need to move on? So it's not a hard and fast rule. I do know some accelerators are very quick, very intense.
Yeah.
Our intensity is getting you embedded, getting you the access, the resources that you need. That's how we're operating. That's the word. And we're health tech as well, so it's, we're just making sure we think that's poorly served. Certainly in Birmingham, the West Midlands, we have over 600 med tech companies, and nobody knows about that, but that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get them the resources and the capability they need to succeed. So we're not 3 months, 6 months. We're about a 3-year program, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 3 months or 6 months is just, to me, it's from a drug development standpoint, it's just nothing, right? That's a blink of an eye in the drug development life cycle, right? You could still be, very early stage, and it's such a quick time period. But at the same time, I see these, academic collections being so important as resources for new companies. And, so taking advantage of them are definitely a great thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, what we're trying to do is, and we make it all accessible. So you could be a company on the fifth floor. If you can access those experts on the third floor. I mean, the idea is to get people working together, or get people labs that are are close to each other, so that if they want to collaborate, they can.
Mhm.
And on the fourth floor, we have a huge training center, open space that people can mingle and obviously discuss ideas. And then on the fourth floor, again, the whole prototyping space. That's quite unique in the UK, actually, to be able to do that, because we'll have a 3D printing farm being set up, and a place where people can actually make stuff. They use the word technology sandpit, but basically what it means is people can go in and play and make things, whether it's using 3D printers or using tooling. And that's become very, very interesting. And to be honest, I was quite unsure about it, but I've now seen some reinforcement points where people are actually saying, yeah, we do need that kind of space. So think about it. Third floor, clinicians talk about immunology. You can work with clinicians who can help you do your clinical trials, because we've got an expert called Professor Pan Kearns, who's working with the EMEA, the European agency, to do what we call fit for filing. So if you do a clinical trial with her, and guess what? It's if it hits its milestone, it's going to be registrable. And she's attracted an awful lot of attention, particularly from American companies, funnily enough. And that's all on the third floor. That resource is open. People can access it. And then you can make things on the fourth floor. You can do training courses on the fourth floor. And then you've got massive labs, so you can actually go and do things in. And on the fifth floor, more of the same. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to really make it a very engaging and almost an open collaboration. But of course, people, when it comes to IP, have to, exert some kind of common sense. But the bottom line is, if you want an expert in brain cancer and I put them in a lab next door to you, guess what? You're going to talk to each other.
Nice. Really nice. So what are some of the top challenges that you see in life sciences?
Well, at the moment in the UK, it is actually, fully enough, lab space has been voted as being one of the biggest issues at the moment, and we're dealing with that. We're going to be open just at the right time, fully enough, and everybody else is trying to build to demand. So that's one that's fairly well documented. I know I think Oxford and Cambridge are looking for 1 million square foot, so it's a lot of space that's required. Birmingham, being located strategically, is actually a very short distance away from Oxford, for example. So we're building about 100,000 square foot. I mean, it's a start, but it's going to be open at the right time, if that makes sense. Of course, then there's issues about funding, but then of course, funding is going to be, it depends on the business case that you produce. But right now, for us, it's the actual real estate. Then skills, again, because of course, it's very hard to access skills. And also, London's expensive to live in, as is Oxford and Cambridge. So, it's understanding those human factors that are needed. But again, we have one of the largest medical schools, so we have skills on tap, and actually, it's relatively cheap to live in Birmingham. So, we think we've got the right recipe, if that makes sense, to solve some of those problems.
Very good. And what are some of the biggest opportunities that you see in life sciences?
Well, I think precision medicine obviously is very important.
Yeah.
I'm really excited by it. Now, in the old days, we used to say precision medicine or personalized medicine, depending on your definition, is given the right drug, or the right dose, the right time, the right, and so on and so forth. No, my definition is that the right patient gets the right treatment. It's as simple as that. Okay. And what I mean by that is that the right patient, depending on and whatever ethnicity you are, okay, really important, okay, you get the right treatment, and that may not necessarily be a drug. It could be a med tech solution, could be an app that helps you train how you think or what you need to do. Make sure to get the right treatment. I think the pandemic has shown, hasn't it, that we still have this health inequality that goes on, and we need to challenge that. And to me, it's the right patient gets the right treatment. It also gets away from this, with the average, Well, I always used to make me laugh because, in pharmacokinetics, they used to default to the average adults of
Right.
70 kilos. Can I assure you, I haven't been 70 kilos for nearly 30. being an ex-rugby player, I kind of skewed the curve a long time ago. But what I'm trying to say is it's this understanding that actually N equals 1 is very important, and I want to go back to that. Another area that really excites me is bedside manufacturing. There's going to be a lot more treatment at the patient's bedside, and I've seen some fantastic technologies where, my father was diabetic, and unfortunately he lost his leg due to diabetes. What I didn't know was that actually life expectancy for particularly 70-year-olds who lose a leg is actually worse than some cancer outcomes.
Wow.
Average, it's between 1 to 5 years, would you believe? And funnily enough, not funnily enough, really, my father died within a year of the operation. So he spent a whole year without a leg, and he really hated it, really, really hated it. And then he passed away
Mm.
because your leg is a pump, okay? And when you're in your 70s, you need your legs, so your heart pumps blood to the brain, to the rest of the body, but actually it's your legs that pump the blood back up. Now,
Huh.
if you're a young man or woman or whatever you identify yourself, you're healthy, your legs are working. You can survive with one leg technically because you still got a very healthy circulatory system. But as you get older, and your health is compromised with other comorbidities, guess what? The pumping is being compromised. So yeah, it really struck me that actually wasn't a good place to be. And I've seen some companies develop cell therapies based on white blood cells, which they harvest from the patient's bedside, form a gel, put it back into the wound, and some of the feet you see that are regenerated almost. It's just unbelievable.
Right.
But the problem is, it's bedside manufacturing. Is it a
Mm.
medicine? Is it a medical device? And to me, I want to help those companies succeed because there's a much needed unmet medical need there. I don't need to do stats to understand if something's worked really, really well. The mechanism is a little bit uncertain, but actually, is a medicine? Come on, guys, let's use it. And let's try and make a difference.
Yeah.
And that frustrates me as well. So, bedside manufacturing is a really interesting concept. And I just hope we have a regulatory framework that allows people to develop those medicines or those medical devices. Depends how you want to frame it. So that excites me.
Very good. There are three questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
People inspire me, um, and I have to say, my mum and dad inspired me. They were both. My dad was an economic migrant, and my mum was a refugee from Egypt. Would you believe? And they've always given me the encouragement to learn and use education. And in the UK, we're blessed to have free education and free healthcare. And without those, I wouldn't be a professor today, working in this exciting environment. Other role models I'd like to talk about are people like Harry Ferris, who used to be a senior guy at GSK, who was looking at doing things completely different, and really inspired me. Pat Crowley, and another Irishman, funnily enough, who had a fantastic work ethic. I want to be in the office first, Gino, and then last person to leave because that shows people. Like, and then the guy called Professor Charles Bounter at Oxford, who's just an amazing guy, incredible human being, who's been very supportive of me and who's did some fantastic open innovation models at Oxford, which I think have been world leading. So yeah, I think people inspire me, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. What concerns you?
Well, what concerns me, and I bring that as current role, is the lack of social interaction for innovation. Why I don't want, what worries me is that we forget that innovation often occurs by this, the barroom conversations or the conversations by the coffee machines or in the corridors. And if we're not going to go back into the labs, then we're going to lose it. Now, I'll
Mm.
give you a really good real example. We had a problem with a mobile phone signal in the region because we've got some very old buildings, beautiful buildings in the 1930s that absorb signals. And we have brand new modern buildings that reflect the signal. So you've got this really difficult mix. And last year, I remember January 21, I was walking at the hotel and it was cold and it was a bit slippery. And I slipped into a person and I bumped into him and he said hello. His name was Graham and he's from Liverpool and I was from Liverpool. We started having the conversation. I said, Graham, what are you doing here? He goes, well, I'm here to measure mobile phone signal strengths. at the local hospital. I said, are you? Yeah. Why? Because, well, I've got a solution that could work, that can help people's problems. Oh, okay. Would you mind doing a favor for me and do some surveys for me and do that? So he did. And then basically what happened was he got a solution that was proposed. We then tested it in the hotel, and guess what? It worked. And guess what? We're going to use that technology in the PHTA. So
Nice.
that's an example of synchronicity. Yeah,
Hmm.
something events that lead to you to do something unexpected that helps you find a solution. I mean, it really is. And and what I want people to understand with, I believe in hybrid working. Don't get me wrong, but we do need to go back and work in labs and work with each other, because actually it's those discussions, the coffee machines actually is where some
Yes.
of the great ideas happen. So I understand, and like Elon Musk mentioned about going back to the lab, and the Google guys, because actually it really is important. So there we are today. If I'd gone in and that guy hadn't gone into work and we hadn't bumped into each other, okay, outside the hotel, I wouldn't today would still be searching a solution for the problem I had. So that's a
In
good
part, you
example.
could be thankful for the ice too.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. And actually, he was from Liverpool, so it was the connection of the cities that initiated it. But that's a true story, by the way, totally true.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, what excites you?
Well, I think I kind of touched upon it,
You
precision
did.
medicine. Yeah, I think that to me really excites me.
Yep.
Um, you know, the right patient, the right treatment, and I think our knowledge of cancer treatment has evolved enormously. And and I want people to think about treatment doesn't have to be a drug therapy. It could be a portfolio of opportunities, or treatment plans. It could be
Hmm.
a med tech as well, health tech. I think I'm forever using my phone now to measure how many steps I walk, and have I met my goals that week, and it helps me remind me to be more active. So yeah, that's what I want to see. And bedside manufacturing, I mean, look into that. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds extremely interesting, especially whenever you think about the supply chain for CAR T cell therapies. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know this, my understanding of it is that you extract the cells from the existing patient, you then deplete the existing patient's immune system, and you leave them depleted until the point that the cells come back from being, reinforced with this CAR capability, right? So essentially, you're leaving somebody in this state potentially for a month or more, while the supply chain and the development happens. And so my understanding of the entire process just sounds really taxing from a patient that's already, in a very, taxing state anyway.
Well, yes, but you're missing a critical point. You re-engineer their cells, the white blood cells, and then you put them back into the system. And guess what? The system may reject, and so you may have a cytokine storm. So you have to immunosuppress the individual against the cytokine storm. So it really is quite critical.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's multi-component. You may have to send the cells to be engineered outside of the hospital to maybe to the manufacturer of the technology themselves, and it's brought back in. But you are actually technically reintroducing a foreign body because it's been manipulated back into the body. But when these CAR therapies work, they work extremely well.
Hmm.
So in my previous role as chief scientist of the Royal Pharmaceutical Society, I had the great pleasure to interview the chairman of Novartis, Jörg Reinhardt, and we had a really good conversation. He said, "Yeah, at the end of the day, it is expensive, complex, but ultimately, if patients recover, that's great. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic advance in therapy."
Yeah.
Um, but there's a whole suite of opportunities, and even now looking at the microbiome, we just had one approved by the FDA for treatments of that. Our knowledge is advancing all the time. So again that's a classic example of kind of personalized treatment where you're actually using other people's, I suppose, fecal matter to
Right.
recolonize the colon.
Yes.
Interesting how it works.
Yeah. Very, very, very true. Well, Gino Martini, thank you so much for being here with me on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciated all of our conversation, and I wish you the best of luck with the PHTA.
Thank you, Don, for having me on your show. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.